We move on to the last session before coffee break, and nobody should move because there's a lot of important announcements before we go to coffee break. But I'm delighted to welcome the co-founder and CEO of Journey, Tim Morgan, to speak to us. We've already met one of his people, Harry, who we will all meet later on the day. Tim is a Canadian based in London and has worked for some of the very big travel agency groups and consortia, including Virtuoso, which I certainly know very well. And he also co-founded a club for the world's most influential travel advisors, the 1000s. So I've not been lucky enough to be invited into that, but there you go. There must be other travel advisors that are influential. And he's also sat on loads of advisory boards and been involved in many global travel plans. Now he's into Journey, which is looking at as the people's media viewing habits are growing and becoming more fragmented, and there's more and more online and offline channels, and it's important for us all to understand how we plan our marketing and sales initiatives. So this is really what we're going to hear from Tim and what Journey is doing and giving us some constructive advice on how we can move that. I know he's also involved in all sorts of charities and so on, which we congratulate him on. But we're delighted to have him with us today, influencing us as how to be influencing. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, John. Thanks very much. I think, there's the clicker. Wonderful. Thank you again, John, and thank you to Martina and Anka for inviting me to be here today. Absolutely thrilled to be here with you all today. First of all, I have to start with an apology, though. If you see me leaning a little to my left more than usual, it's because I just got married 2 weeks ago. So still dealing with the weight of commitment on this side, so I'll try and even me out. Any marriage advice, I absolutely will take it. But I was chatting with my new mother-in-law about this conference, and she said to me, "Tim, am I an influencer? Can I be an influencer?" And of course, being the doting son-in-law now, I said yes, as one does to everything that your mother-in-law asks of you. That's lesson number 1 about marriage that I've learned already. But it brings about interesting questions around what is influence, who are influencers, and that's where I want to start today's presentation, on the future of influence. So when we look at what is influence, there's a very technical definition, and it's the capacity to have an effect on someone's behavior. And really what it's about is helping someone take action, encouraging them to take action. And I have my first question of the day for all of you. Who in here, based on this very simple definition, forget everything else you think about, influencers, who in here, based on this, considers himself an influencer? All right, okay, by the end of this session, I want everyone to have their hand in the air. Definitely by the end of the education session, everyone should have their hand in the air. There is no question that you all have influence and that you are all influencers. The challenge that, especially in our industry in travel, that has happened is it's become a bit of a dirty word, but it's an incredibly important part of what every single one of you does every single day in your jobs. So, that is influence, but when we look at how influence impacts travel, and specifically the path to purchase for travelers, we have to tie it in with especially the very first step, which for the path to purchase for travel is inspiration. So let's look at what is inspiration. It's being mentally stimulated to feel something. So it's very simply to feel something. And because we're in this incredible industry called travel, we get to bring out the best in feelings, the best in emotions, all of the emotions around travel. We're incredibly privileged to be in such an exciting industry. And so what's really interesting, when you think about influence and tie it to the path to purchase and that number 1 step of inspiration, you get into some really interesting data points. And so I'm not here today, either this session or my education session, to talk to you about all the fluffy, beautiful pictures related to social media and influence, to talk to you about the good, the bad stories of influencers at hotels and all of that. You know all of that. What I'm here to talk to you about today, because it's what the next conference is about, is data, being customer-centric, going where your customers are, and as John mentioned earlier, it's also using that data to ultimately drive to profit. So I want you to come out of today, especially in this conference, thinking about social media, thinking about influence in a way that is ultimately driving toward data and to profit for your business. An interesting study came out recently that was done across 70,000 travelers across North America, Europe, Japan, and Australia about the path to purchase. And the path to purchase, just as a reminder, starts with inspiration. And so I'm curious where people think the majority of respondents of that survey, 70,000 around the world, said that they found inspiration the most. Any guesses? Friends, social media. So they're both correct, actually. So the number one is social media. And those 70,000 people said that their first step in the path to purchase for travel started with social media. 78% of those people said social media. The next highest was half of that, and it was a search engine. So if you are not thinking about social media for your business and the fact that your travelers are on social media looking for inspiration, you're missing out on the very first step in the path to purchase, ultimately to get them to book with you. So let's take a little bit of a simple history lesson in modern day inspiration and influence to get us really to where we are today. And again, I'm going to share some real world data points with you to help impact your business. So when we look historically in the modern era, we think about kind of major events and especially major sporting events that really impact people, that inspire people and influence them. You know, this is going back to the early part of the 20th century. And so when we look at the Olympics, you know, it impacts and inspires about 3 billion people annually. We look at the World Cup, of course, big games going on this weekend, about 1.5 billion people annually. And then we start to think about other areas of global influence these days, especially in these days of information and when information is so important. And we look at companies like the BBC, so the largest news company, and we talked about disintermediation of media, John mentioned earlier, where people are getting their information from. The BBC, the New York Times, the largest subscribed newspaper in the world. BBC, monthly viewers, 1.5 billion, so big numbers. New York Times, 10 million subscribers and 1 billion monthly viewers across their digital channels. Now, what's fascinating is the way that social media has transferred the power of influence and inspiration into the hands of the individual. So today, when we look at individual influence, I pulled out a couple key people here for you. So this person, we're all in Portugal, so we should all know who this is. So Cristiano Ronaldo, of course. And then I pulled out another one who is incredibly influential. Does anyone know who this person is? Yes, I see a couple of hands. So this is Mr. Beast. So Cristiano Ronaldo, of course, has a massive brand himself, but he started out being associated with a massive brand, which ultimately goes back to that World Cup as well, you know, football, soccer. But what's really interesting is with social media, so Cristiano Ronaldo as a person has 632 million followers on just one account on Instagram. So when you start to think about those numbers that we just saw for the most powerful media companies in the world that have been around for decades, you really start to think about how an individual can have so much influence and also using a free service. Cristiano is not paid by Instagram. He was not paid to start his account on Instagram. He does not pay to use Instagram. He gets paid, actually, to use it. So there is this changing in the guard of media and influence. Now, Mr. Beast, on YouTube, he has 416 million subscribers. These are people who have signed up to be in his database. And he has monthly viewers of 1.5 billion. Do you remember that was the same viewership figure for the World Cup? And this is one person who came from Kansas. His parents served in the military. He had no, upbringing that should have entitled him in our privileged society to this, but this is what he has created. And this is the power that social media brings down to the individual and to the level of influence that individuals can have. So all this sounds great, but these are still big numbers. Not everyone has these kinds of numbers. But it brings about another interesting study that literally just came out 2 weeks ago from the Harvard Business Review, where they said that there were 40 million social media individuals around the world that are economically consequential. So as we think about data, we think about social media as more than just pretty pictures. We think about, okay, how does it economically affect my business? So Harvard Business Review, very respected obviously, says there are 40 million of them. And so what we do at Journey is help travel companies get in touch with and build relationships with those individuals that are going to help you have positive economic consequence for your business. Now, what's also very interesting about this is that Harvard Business Review said that in order for an individual to be economically consequential on social media, guess how many followers they needed to have? Any guesses? 100,000, a million, 1,000. So they've done the research and they said to be economically consequential, meaning to influence someone to purchase, you only need 1,000 followers on social media. Now, the average person only has about 200, 300 followers, but if you think about how you can get to 1,000 followers, whether for you individually or for your business, it doesn't seem unattainable. And that's when you can start to build and see these opportunities of actually turning social media into a profit center for your business. So that's where we get into individual action here. Again, all this sounds great, but I'm here to give you the cold, hard facts. Because you think, well, Tim, do people actually purchase based on social media? So let's look at a few other big brand names here that have done studies. Forbes, 80% of consumers have made a purchase based on social media. Hands in the air, how many people in here can say they purchased something based on something they saw on social media? There we go, exactly. So why do we feel that travel is any different? We've all purchased things based on social media, from our friends, as Frank said, or from an influencer, but we've all made purchases off social media. I know there are a lot of corporate-focused agencies in Lufthansa City Center and in the room here today. So we always get asked, well, do business buyers make purchases based off social media? Here you are. LinkedIn is one of the fastest growing and most well-used social media networks. 75% of B2B buyers said they made a purchase based off of social media. So yes, your corporate clients are also making purchases based off of social media. Now let's talk specifically about travel. So another study came out from Luxury Travel Advisor magazine. So as John mentioned, I have a long history in the travel industry, specifically working with travel advisors. So I'm always taking these studies and thinking, okay, but putting on my travel advisor hat, what about travel advisors? How do they fit into all of this? This study was commissioned by Luxury Travel Advisor magazine, and even they found that luxury travelers make purchases based on social media, 76%, based on essentially, they chose brands that they wanted to work with based off of social media. But even more interestingly, 65%, or 60% rather, said that they made decisions based on C2C social media posts. So this is posts from influencers specifically that they referenced here. So even when you get down to a niche group like luxury travelers, even the discerning luxury traveler is being influenced, not only being influenced and inspired by social media, but they're actually taking that full path to purchase to go to actually book based on social media. So now when we think about what is influence, who is an influencer, again, I'm going to ask one more time, and I hope to see everyone's hand in the air. Are you an influencer? Yes, wonderful. So this is just a short preview of what I'm going to be talking about in the education session here today. But I want to end with just this reminder. Who is an influencer inspiring action? I want to give major kudos to Martina and the team at Lufthansa City Center for taking this step. We rarely get called. This was only our second call that we received from a travel agency wanting to get involved in what we're doing. We work with hundreds of hotels, cruise lines, all types of travel companies. And coming from the travel agency business, I knew that there would be hesitation to get into social media. So I have to give kudos for Martina and the team to be so innovative, to take advantage of this massive opportunity. So Lufthansa City Center is, your business already is influential. You are all influencers as part of that business. And it's important to remember your travelers are also influential and influencers. As Frank mentioned earlier in response to the question, friends and family, incredibly influential in driving other people to your business too. But the most important thing here is that you are an influencer. You control this great sphere of influence. So I hope you'll join for the educational session where we'll dive more deeply into specific actions you can take. Harry, the famous Harry, will be up here on stage with me. And I look forward to seeing you then. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Tim. I'm so sorry to correct speakers, but we forgive you because you are Canadian. So what would you know about football or soccer?
Yes.
So it's not the World Cup that starts this weekend. It's the Euro.
Oh, the Euro. Sorry, I didn't know that. Did I not say Euro Cup?
Okay.
Maybe I mixed them together.
And that was the World Cup you were displaying there. So,
yes.
That's okay.
Thank you. Forgive me.
I could also give you about an hour's advice on being married.
Yeah.
You've already gone down the wrong route.
Yeah.
You started by saying yes to everything your mother-in-law says. So, I have to teach you that when you have an argument with your wife, and trust me, it does happen.
Yeah. It's my husband, but
oh, your husband.
I'm sure
sorry,
it's the same
it doesn't
thing.
matter. It's absolutely the same thing. Your spouse.
Yeah.
So to your husband, when you have an argument, you always have to have the last word. You really have to do that, as long as that word is yes, darling.
Yes.
Okay. Then that's the way to the happy marriage. The other thing to do is, once you get married, go off on your honeymoon on your own to Braga and leave your husband alone.
Fabulous. Here I am.
You're off to a great start. You're off to a great
fantastic.
start. So
you,
we will hear much more from Tim.
Thank you,
Congratulations
John.
on the
Thank you very
session
much.
and on your marriage.
Thank you. Thank you.